Hey, yo, salute to all my subscribers and a special shout out to everybody else passing through. YouTube, what's good? Fellas, came through to talk to my fellas for a few minutes. I got a real interesting question and a real interesting topic for this video. Um, and again, I apologize. I do my disclaimer in all my videos because it's, even though I know my subscribers rock with me and come through and check out my content regularly, I got to do this for the people who either are just passing through or don't come through too often. Y'all know me, I like to troll social media. I like to troll real life, the people that I meet, come across, and have interactions with in my dealings and everyday life, in my close circles, and my extended circles, and my colleagues, what have you. Whatever is overheard, spoken about, observed, I bring it to y'all for further processing. So I was talking to a colleague of mine, and we were kind of chatting it up about, women and certain things that happen throughout the course of certain relationships. And he was telling me about a situation with his partner where, he gets mad at her because she doesn't listen to things that he says. And, he gave me a couple of examples, ran down a few scenarios, and he was talking about how, they got into an argument because they were talking about the situation, and then days went by, and then she asked a question, which clearly indicated that she either didn't remember what he had said prior, didn't think it was important, or just forgot, or just didn't acknowledge it for whatever reason. And we started talking, and we started trading some kind of war stories, and I kind of came to a realization, and I'd like to know what y'all, what my other fellas out there think. And I think this is a real thing that we really need to dissect, discuss, and break down. So here's my question, fellas. In a relationship setting, right? And by relationship, I mean either a long-term situation, a live-in situation, maybe you have kids, maybe, you just live together, or a marriage situation. Is it men who don't communicate in relationships, or is it the women? And I'm gonna tell you why I asked that question, and this is why I say this video is for the fellas, because I think my fellow men will understand what I'm talking about. And let me know, comment down below. But I started thinking, and it hit me that throughout my life, throughout the years and years of my different interactions and dealings with different women, whether as friends or whether as, as partners in previous relationships, acquaintances, colleagues, what have you, or me being in the hospitality industry for the past decade, just coming across different men and different women and just having those conversations with them. It kind of occurred to me that every time I speak to a woman who's talking about a stereotypical negative kind of generalization around men not communicating, it hit me that it's usually always pertaining to a certain set of things. So like when I speak to most women and they'll say, they'll subscribe to that same stereotype that men don't communicate, and I ask for examples. Typically the examples I get are related to men not being open about their feelings, not wanting to open up about, what they're really feeling, not being vulnerable or, sensitive, or showing, what men might perceive to be weakness that women look for. And it's usually related to that kind of thing, like men being kind of closed off or not being too talkative or too eager to volunteer and share personal, deep thoughts or feelings that go on, in the deep, dark recesses of their psyches. That's usually the answers that I get from women when I ask for examples about how men don't communicate. It's usually answers that have to do with those things. So I thought about it. And earlier on in this platform, not too long ago actually, I put up a video where I kind of drew a correspondence between boys and girls, men and women growing up as kids, and how boys are raised drastically different from women, and how our rearing is more geared to like boys taught, who are taught to be tougher and taught to not show weakness and walk off pain and not show that something hurts if it does. And, we're taught to be more aggressive and competitive, as we get into sports and even the different games we play as kids where, boys is typically like cops and robbers or that kind of thing where it's one person on one side and the other person on the other. So it's all about competition and a winning versus losing kind of thing. And how that, can potentially condition us as we get into adulthood and have to enter adult relationships. And I thought about it and I had to ask myself, and I'm going to ask all my fellas too, is that kind of thing when women talk about men not communicating and they break down as examples the different things that I just mentioned, is that really a communication deficiency? Is it really? Or is it just that as men, we are just conditioned to be closed off by default to certain things? It's kind of like you get a new phone, right? And out of the box, that phone may have a lot of features, but certain features may be by default turned off. And you can turn them on. They're obviously capable of carrying out those functions. You can definitely program them to do that, but by default, they're just off, right? Because I don't think any man is incapable of communicating. I just think by default, the specific things that I've gotten as examples from women, I think are turned off because of the conditioning over the years that young boys are raised to be a certain way. And so as we get into our adulthood, it's autopilot. It's default at that point. And then somewhere in our adulthood, as we get into, serious relationships and have kids and these different things will kind of soften us up to be more aware of those things. And then we start to work on those things. But I don't see those things as communication deficiencies. When I ask the question, fellas, who really communicates more or less in relationships, men or women? See, I'm talking about the operational aspects of the relationship, the day-to-day. Just the normal everyday shit that goes on, whether it has to do with bills or the kids or whether it has to do with, I don't know, vacation planning or planning to go out, on an outing to do something or whatever it is. Because it seems like the majority of men that I speak to have very similar stories of their girlfriends or their wives or what have you. Them talking to them about specific things, very specific things. Because with men, usually our gripes are specific and not generalized. I feel like, I could be wrong, but I feel like in my experience, women usually have more generalized gripes about men, in the specific relationship that they're in. And usually men have more specific gripes. And I feel like it's true that, a lot of times when men get upset at their girlfriends or their wives, and there's issues about something, it's usually a very specific thing. Like my colleague who I was talking to was telling me about a situation where he and his girl were planning to go out to a show or a concert or no, to see a fight. And it was a week prior. He said he wanted to see the fight, asked her to pick up the tickets for it. So a week goes by, it's the day of the fight. She asks him, oh, so what are we going to do tonight? Are we going out tonight? His response was, well, I told you last week I wanted to go to the fight. I asked you to get the tickets, so where are the tickets? Oh, I forgot. Or, I didn't get them because I didn't think you were serious. Or, oh, you didn't mention it again, so I wasn't sure if you really wanted to go. That kind of thing. Those are the types of gripes that I see men most often having. But those are the things that I'm talking about when I say communication. I feel like men very directly say what it is we want. And I feel like at that time, in that moment, we will communicate based on what is going on in that moment. But I think the majority of men say exactly what it is they're thinking about the situation, regardless of what it is. And oftentimes we won't say any more or any less. But I think that's the part that women misjudge or incorrectly perceive as us not communicating, just because our version of communicating is different from theirs, because we're different creatures and we're wired differently. So because of the way that I choose to communicate or about what things I choose to communicate might be different from yours, is that any less communication? And if the more literal of the communication aspect is less perpetrated by women as opposed to men, then who's really the partner in a relationship that has more of an issue with communicating? Is it men or women? I really want to know. I think if any man who watches this video really thinks about their relationship, their current relationship or their prior relationships, and gives me examples in the comments, I think we would really start to see a trend of just how many men feel like, wait a minute, now that I think about it, I do communicate in my relationship. It's my wife or my girlfriend or what have you, or whoever, who either doesn't acknowledge, recognize, or see that communication, or they just don't think it's important. Because I think that's a problem too. I think that's a big problem. I think women in general, I could be wrong, and I'm not going to say all women, but I think women in general take the approach of, if what my man or my husband or boyfriend is communicating to me about, if it isn't directly related to the relationship, and if it isn't directly related to me, like the woman, they feel like if what we're discussing or communicating or voicing our opinions or thoughts about, if it's not directly related to them somehow or the relationship, then it's not important, or they don't think it's important, so we shouldn't think it's important. That's what I think it is. And if that's the case, if any of my fellas who's watching this video right now, if you agree and if you think that's the case, isn't that some fucked up shit? And if so, then what can we do about it? What needs to be done about it? What should be done about it? Because I'm not going to stand by and allow for men to continue to get a bad rap, to continue to get, fucked up reputation and all of these different stereotypes, when if we really start to break them down one for one, I think the landscape of relationships might start to look a little bit different. I don't know, man. I just came through to, throw it out there. Fellas, let me know what y'all think. This video is not for the ladies, it's for the fellas. It's for my fellow men out there who feel like we get the short end of the stick. So any of my females, I don't want y'all jumping in the comments. I don't want y'all sounding angry and bitter and acting like, I'm totally wrong. Because I really think there's something here, and I think men's lives matter. I think the opinion of my fellas is just as important, because we matter out here too. Fellas, let me know what y'all think. I don't pretend to know everything. I just know what I know. Let me know what y'all think about this one, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace and love.